Welcome to another episode of Gully Cricket to Bouncy Wicket podcast. I'm your host Srinivas here. I'm joined by Raja and Manoj today. Let's begin by firstly thanking you all for tuning into our previous episode and showing your support. We are coming into this episode after International Women's Day on March 8th, and we thought we should feature women's cricket at the focus and center of this episode. We have a very special guest joining us today who tirelessly worked to promote women's cricket through multiple endeavors. Incidentally, it is the first time we are having a guest on our show and we are excited to pick his brain. But before we begin, let's catch up on the goings on in the cricket world this week in Power Play.
Thanks, Inu. So, India and England are playing their five-match T20I series, and the first match ended yesterday. And we will talk about this in a little more detail going on into the episode. And in other international news, as we had informed you last week, India and South Africa are in a very competitive five ODI and three T20 international series. And the first three matches ended as of the point of this recording. And South Africa are 2-1 ahead with Lizelle Lee scoring a brilliant 130 odd to put South Africa in a very dominant position in the third ODI, which was awarded to South Africa on the basis of their DLS score because of rain interruption. And Afghanistan and Zimbabwe are playing a two-test match series in the UAE at a neutral venue. Zimbabwe won the first match easily, and Afghanistan is on currently, as of the point of the recording, are on a great position to win the second test match on the back of a brilliant double century by Hasmatullah Shahidi and 164 by the captain Asghar Afghan. And also on this journey, they've become the fastest team to score 500 plus on a test match. So Zimbabwe does have a lot of catching up to do if they want to save this match.
Yeah, thanks Raja. Moving on, I have one update for you from the Road Safety World Series. Sri Lanka Legends is currently leading the table with 16 points. And India is placed in the second position. India would in fact have been the table toppers if not for the 37 balls 75 from the legend Kevin Peterson. Also, the Sri Lanka mainstream team is touring West Indies to play all formats of cricket. West Indies have already won the three T20 match series and also the first two ODIs. So that leaves the final ODI, as literally a dead rubber.
Yeah, thank you Manoj and Raja for bringing us those stories. So let's move on to India versus England first T20I. So yeah, India lost the toss and England has chosen to bat. One more interesting point to note here is India went in with three spinners while England went with the lone spinner they have Adil Rashid. So Raja, what are your thoughts on the match?
Yeah, thanks, Inu. So it was nice to see both the teams in action in T20 after a long test season. And England especially always looks a very different side compared to the test teams in white ball cricket. And they're incidentally the number one ranked T20I team right now. We were expecting highly competitive cricket. But having said that, India would be disappointed in how they've started the innings. Because they wanted to, I think, approach the game in a very aggressive manner, and in that process they ended up losing a lot of wickets during the power play itself. And then Shreyas Iyer and Hardik Pandya had to do a bit of rebuilding for India to reach a competitive score.
Yeah, Raja, I agree with you. Let me start with the Indian team selection. So they have rested Rohit apparently for the first two 20s. I really don't get that. I mean, you rest your star batsman and you go with KL Rahul and Shikhar Dhawan. If you look at the Indian batting, right, I mean, a lot of players have not played for some time. All of them really didn't look. I mean, they look trusty. So players who've returned to playing cricket, for example, Shikhar Dhawan, KL Rahul, they really looked out of nick, right? I mean, that was a big problem. Overall, apart from Shreyas Iyer, nobody looked solid. The struggle with the bat for Kohli continues. Pandya also looked out of nick. A lot of problems for India in batting department.
Yeah, thanks Manoj. I think India's top order has failed miserably. And at least for the top three wickets, I don't give credit to England. Of course, they bowled beautifully, but in the middle overs especially. And top, if you see KL Rahul's wicket, it was an inside edge. The ball was much away from the off stump, and Kohli, I don't know when he played a shot like that last. It was pathetic shot. And Shikhar Dhawan, I don't know. He must be playing that pace in nets for Delhi Capitals because they have Nokia and Rabada, but I don't see him playing comfortably against the pace of Mark Wood.
He's a quality batsman, if you ask Shikhar. If you ask me, I think it's just a one-off innings. I'm sure, as Manoj has indicated, he hasn't played cricket in a long time after the ODI series ended in Australia. Yeah, I think he would just be a little rusty, and I'm sure he'll do better in the coming games, at least in my opinion. But I do stand with you on the point of Virat Kohli. I think he'd be very disappointed in how he has gotten out.
Yeah, definitely.
Overall, I feel, guys, that India were trying too hard during the first power play. I mean, we have to look at the conditions and how the bowlers are bowling, and it's not the end of the world if you don't get, say, 60 or 70 runs in the first power play, right? I mean, that was quite evident.
Credit where it's due, guys. England bowling really did well in putting pressure on Indian team in the middle overs, especially as they say T20 matches are won and lost in power plays, right? Yeah. So India ended up at 22 for 3 in the power play. I think it has significant impact on the final result of the total score.
I think India didn't get enough on the board. I mean, 124 was very little to defend. I mean, looking at the England side, they have very. If you look at the bowling lineup, they have very explosive players at the top, and it can go all the way till Adil Rashid, who can also play. So keeping that in mind, I think we didn't have enough on the board.
But a good part of this T20I scheduling, at least, is that India is the teams are playing 5 matches in the span of 9 games. So it will be quick. It would be easy for teams to shrug off bad performances and just look forward, because the matches will be coming to them pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I'm sure all these players have been playing IPL for quite some time, and yeah, I'm sure they are going to shrug it off very soon. But let's look at how the Indian batting has fared, at least the middle order. So yeah, Shreyas Iyer has been selected ahead of Surya Kumar Yadav, right? Everyone started blaming team management, saying Surya Kumar Yadav is very good talent and giving Iyer a chance is not a good thing. But I'm sure he silenced all his critics with his beautiful innings. If not for Shreyas Iyer, I don't know where India would have ended up yesterday.
I think people are conflating T20I form with ODI form, because if you remember in the Australian series, Shreyas Iyer and Hardik Pandya were there to finish the particular match, if I remember. I think it was the second T20, to make sure that India won that game. So he does not, I don't think it's, in my opinion, that he deserves to lose his spot, at least in the T20I format, Shreyas Iyer.
No,
and I'm sure, Surya Kumar Yadav is a great talent, and I'm sure his time will come, because he has made it to the squad on the basis of his excellent white ball form, including in the IPL and Syed Mushtaq Ali, or even this thing. So he is going to get his opportunity, I'm sure, and he just needs to bide his time. But dropping Shreyas Iyer after a decent outing in Australia is not the right way, I felt.
Also, guys, a word on Pant. I mean, it was a great little inning from him. Showed glimpses of this brilliance, that reverse scoop to.
I don't know what do they call that shot exactly. Is it a reverse scoop or reverse paddle? I don't know. But yeah, it's amazing. He did that to Jimmy Anderson in the Test series, and now he's doing it to Jofra Archer. Amazing, fearless cricket. I think Pant's struggle in T20 International has been continuing for quite some time, right? I don't know what happens to him when he comes to T20 International matches. Always, I think he's having a strike rate of around 120 for T20 internationals. I'm sure, I don't have exact stat with me, but I'm sure his IPL strike rate must be around 130, 140s.
Could be a point. I think he also tries to go very hard from ball one. Like his best innings, at least in the test seasons of this that went by recently, have been when he's tried to play the first few balls normally and then explode, because he always has that ability to explode. I think he starts going pretty hard pretty early on and ends up either missing out on a lot of opportunities or just throwing his wicket away, which explains a bit of the strike rates, I feel.
Yes, Raja. I mean, what we've seen in the Test series is really a matured player now, and I really hope that he doesn't lose that. Getting out softly, throwing away his wicket. I really would have liked if he had carried on from there.
And let's not forget that Rishabh Pant has made his entry into the T20I team on the back of his Test form. Right, he wasn't in the T20I squad or going into Australia.
Yeah, hope he'll do the necessary adjustments and make sure he's going at a good strike rate. And I think it's only a matter of time for him to do that. And let's look at England's bowling unit once. We all know they had an amazing white ball team. I think they truly deserve to be world number one T20I team. What do you say, guys?
True. I mean, if you look at the lines that they bowled, they were very tough. They gave nothing away. That made life difficult for the Indian batsmen.
Yeah, so they started off with Adil Rashid. He bowled some really tight lines, and he was backed up by Jofra, who picked up 3 wickets, and everyone pitched in with 1 wicket each. So all in all, a great bowling performance. They can be really proud of this.
Due credit has to be given to Eoin Morgan here. I think his captaincy has been amazing throughout the white ball stint that he's having with England, right? The way he used the bowlers, the way he does the field placement or batting order, whatever you say, or the trust that he has on his players or the continuity that he gives for the players in the team. I think it's amazing. What do you say about it, Raja?
It's a good point, especially as Manoj has also touched upon it. You have the likes of Jofra Archer and Mark Wood, tear away pace bowlers, right? 145, 150, they're touching almost 150 if they want to. And then he ends up giving the ball to Adil Rashid for the first over. So that just tells you how much, I think he wants India, he doesn't, how tactically he's trying to run his team in terms of not letting the opposition presume what the plans would be. Even I think that's a small indication of what a brilliant captain he's becoming, and has shown a lot of examples and leading England to its first World Cup. That in itself is a testament to his leadership skills.
He often reminds me of Dhoni in his captaincy skills. He's cool on the field and then he makes bold decisions.
And a deadly finisher.
Yeah, of course, a deadly finisher.
This is what I was expecting when the series would have started. I think we'd also talked about how Morgan's infusion into the squad would also give them a boost, right? Just in terms of his presence, and that's what happened yesterday, I feel.
Yeah.
And guys, about Kohli's form, right? I mean, he doesn't look like his usual self, right? I mean, if you look at how he batted, he was trying a little hard. He wanted to, break the shackles with that shot. Before the ball he got out also, he wanted to, maybe score a boundary just to, relieve some pressure. So what do you guys feel? Is he trying too hard?
Yeah, Manoj, I think Kohli is really trying hard to get runs in the white ball cricket especially. I think he's going through a lean patch. I'm sure he's going to come out of it quickly, and he's staying very positive the way he speaks in press conference about his form and all. I'm sure he's a legendary batsman and he's going to come out of it very quickly. Coming to India's bowling unit, is it a right combination of bowling unit that they have selected? What do you guys think about it?
No, I think this is not the lineup that we would have anyway going forward into the World Cup, because Bhuvneshwar would, if he's fit and doing well, Bhuvneshwar would open with Bumrah. I think it was just an opportunity to mix things around, and he just wanted, this is an opportunity. I think Kohli took it as an opportunity for just to test the strength of the bowling squad and with his combinations. Other than that, this is definitely not the lineup that India will play with.
To be fair, I think Deepak Chahar should be picked ahead of Shardul Thakur if you ask me in T20s at least. What do you think about it, Manoj?
Yeah, that's a good point. I also felt he should have picked ahead of Thakur, and because he's got the variations, and I personally feel he's better than Shardul. If I were Kohli, I would have gone with 2 spinners and two pace bowlers.
The only reason that maybe I feel Kohli would have gone with Shardul Thakur instead of Deepak Chahar would be that even Bhuvneshwar Kumar is an out and out swing bowler, and so is Deepak Chahar. That would be a bit of a similar kind of a attack. I think that could be a reason where he wanted a bit of extra pace that Shardul has, and
Yeah,
that could be that could be a reason why he was picked ahead.
yeah, that's true, Raja. But if Bhuvneshwar Kumar is coming off from a good form, I'm sure like we can do it like that. But we are not sure how Bhuvi is going to perform, how Hardik is going to bowl, and Shardul seriously on T20s. I don't know how much we can rely on it as a sole bowler. So all the three bowlers that we are going to go in with are doubtful, right? We are not sure how they are going to perform. That's the only concern, and especially
Yeah.
going against a strong T20 lineup like England.
Good feature of Shardul Thakur's cricket has been that his ability to surprise us, whether
Yeah,
it be in his gem of innings in a few white ball games or even in the recent test match. He is someone who's a very hardworking cricketer, and he's not out and out. Wouldn't look at Shardul Thakur in a team's lineup and be worried too much. But then that is when his performances rise, I feel, when he actually puts in that extra yard and exceeds his limits. And this is a cricketer who's been able to do that. To your point, I do agree that India's fast bowling selection for this game at least is a little iffy, but I'm sure, as I said, they would make a few changes, I'm sure, going into the match tomorrow. And to add to this a little bit, I feel that there are two reasons why Shikhar Dhawan will be stuck with, because firstly, India doesn't have an out and out attacking left-handed opening batting option. Even
How
in
about
the
trying Ishan Kishan?
no, you could do that, but again, would you put in depth?
No, the first choice
someone who's-
openers are already first
Yeah.
choice openers
No,
are Rahul
yeah.
and Rohit, right?
Correct. But as I said, because I'm sure this is an opportunity for the team to build towards the World Cups, and we all know how good Shikhar has been in ICC tournaments, at least. I think that the tag of the ICC Cups lifts his performance by several notches. And he will want to do well, and he's coming off not a lot of cricket. He's played a few matches in SMT, that's it, after coming back. Other than that, he hasn't had too much cricket, but just before that, his IPL form has also been pretty good. I think he rediscovered his attacking self for Delhi Capitals this previous IPL.
So I don't think nothing much is left to talk about on England's batting. Once you see the score, once you see the target as 120, 130 with the kind of batting lineup that England have, they are definitely going to, make use of the low total. And they have started blasting from word go. So what do you think about England's batting, guys? Do you have some points to add on?
I think the only way we could have won this match is to bowl out the England lineup, which didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. But the only one word that comes to mind regarding England's innings is clinical. It was a clinical performance. They took it. They didn't overcomplicate the low score, because teams can get to have a tendency to just go at it casually, and because there is no scoreboard pressure. Sometimes it could happen that when you start off slow, and that can create pressure. So they didn't let that opportunity be handed out. Even if they were not losing wickets, they made sure that the scoreboard was ticking, and it was a very clinical performance from the world number one team.
So guys, do you think India will bounce back on Sunday's match?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt in my mind.
True, Raj. I mean, they will look back at their batting and try to do some fixes there, and obviously they will look at their bowling combination as well. Yeah, definitely they would like to bounce back. Hello, as informed earlier, we have a very special guest on our podcast today. It's Mr. Vishal Yadav. He's the founder and CEO of website femalecricket.com. Launched in 2016, femalecricket.com is the first and only dedicated platform for women's cricket. After receiving a tremendous response to femalecricket.com, Mr. Vishal decided to start a cricket academy exclusively for women cricketers. The popularity of this venture is evident from the fact that today they have over 20k YouTube subscribers, 24k Twitter followers, 130,000 Instagram followers, and over 2 lakh Facebook followers. And more importantly, inspiring a lot of young girls to get into cricket. Mr. Vishal and his ventures have had a significant contribution to the growth of women's cricket among people. Welcome to the show, Vishal, and thank you for accepting our invitations and coming to our show. So, Vishal, we have a bunch of questions lined up for you. The first question from our side to you would be: you have one of the largest website in cricket dedicated to women's. Could you tell us how femalecricket.com came about, and what were your challenges?
Yeah, thank you for that lovely introduction. Pleasure being on this chat. To answer your question, how did female cricket come about? Again, I'm a huge cricket fan. Watched a lot of cricket growing and wanted to represent India. But again, that was a far-fetched dream, which I realized when I was in my college. And soon after I was done with my college, and my after I was done with my studies, I took up a lot of corporate jobs. One fine day in one of those corporates that I was working, again I was not enjoying, of course, and I was reading and researching a lot about cricket and what's happening in cricket, and that was the time I stumbled upon this website, which is the ICC's official website, icccricket.com, and it was one of those articles that I was referring to. I was reading, and I read that there are close to 104, 105 countries around the world that play cricket, and here I was sitting in Mumbai, only aware that only Indian and Australia, Pakistan, couple of these countries they play cricket. But this particular article gave me a whole new perspective. It told me that there's huge cricket, there's a huge global cricket community out there, and I was thinking to myself, how are they playing cricket in these countries? How are they sustaining it? How are they building a community? What's the national team dress color looks like? Who are the players in the national team? And all these questions kept on propping up, and that sort of led to a lot of curiosity. And I started reading and researching a lot about the associate and affiliate cricketing nations. And it was during this research that I interacted and met a lot of cricketers, out of which 30-35% were female cricketers. And while talking to them, I realized that they have got a beautiful story to tell. Their challenges with regards to cricket, are far more wider than what a male cricketer would face. They are not paid, they are not celebrated. The local media, the newspapers, they do not cover their cricketing stories. And I thought to myself, let me do something about it. Forget about these countries, these associate and affiliate cricket nations. I wasn't even aware of the national cricket team that is there in India. Bearing few names like Mithali Raj and Jhulan Goswami, and couple of other names, I did not know what the exact playing 11 of the Indian women's cricket team looks like. And that was like a reality check. The first thing that I did was went to Google and started searching for what's the playing 11 for the Indian team looks like, and I landed up on a Wikipedia article, which was again an outdated one. So the information that was available on the internet also was very sparse, and that sort of led to one thing, and that gave me the confidence, and the idea propped up that let me do something about it. Let me start a platform that would cater to the women's side of cricket, that would cater to their cricketing stories, and eventually that might inspire and encourage more and more girls to take up cricket. So one thing led to another, and femalecricket.com, the website, was born.
Great, Vishal. That was a very interesting story. So let's move on to the second question. Femalecricket.com has a good social media reach, podcast network, and you cover female cricket across the globe. So how big is your team, and where is your team based out of?
Well, it's a very small team at the moment. We all are located out of Mumbai. That's where I played a lot of cricket myself. That's where I'm very much familiar with the Mumbai cricket. As far as the team is concerned, we are currently 5 full-time people, and then there are 5 freelancers or part-time members that we work with. The full-time members consist of writers, consist of social media person who looks after all the social media handles. There's a finance guy. There's one who is the business developer, looks after all the deals that we do around brands, and there's me who looks after all the departments, currently looking at all the verticals. So it's a very small team, but uh, again, we rely a lot on freelancers and part-time team members.
Okay, Vishal, thank you. Your team may be small but very effective. Let me tell you that. So, moving on to the third question. As mentioned earlier, you also have a cricket foundation exclusively for women. How has the response been so far?
Yeah, so we do have a female cricket academy, which is one of its kind, which is an exclusive training facilities only for girls. The reason why we started this was when we realized that there is not a single academy, not a single cricket club giving exclusive training to the girls. And soon after the success of Indian women's cricket team in the 2017 World Cup, we started getting a lot of calls and inboxes on our social media handles that we want to push our daughters, we want to make them cricketers, and we want to ensure that they also have a career in cricket. So I was researching, I was looking out for academies to sort of help out these parents and their daughters. And when we did not find any, we decided to start our own cricket academy, and we named it as Female Cricket Academy. Currently, we have got only one center, which is in Mumbai. As far as the response is concerned, it has been amazing. In the last 3 years of our existence, we have trained over 250 plus girls in Mumbai alone, and we do get a lot of calls and inquiries from girls who are outside of Mumbai. The challenge is that we do not have any hostel facility in Mumbai at the moment. So the idea is to expand female cricket academy centers and have at least one center in each and every state of India going forward. That's one of the vision. That's one of the aim that we have with female cricket. I don't know when will that happen, given the COVID situation that we all are in, but definitely that is one of the target of the next 3 years.
Great, Vishal. I really hope that you achieve your vision and your goals.
Yeah, hi Vishal, this is Srinivas. I have a few questions for you. So, from the time you have started your work in 2016, how have you seen the reach of the women's cricket widen in India?
Well, like I said, the response has been amazing. What happened was when we started in 2016, in just 2 months' time, there was Women's T20 World Cup happening in India, which was the T20 World Cup 2016. So that also gave us the initial boost that this platform wanted. Within just so we launched this website in Feb, and within 2 months, we had close to 10,000 followers across our platforms. So we knew that what we are doing is something that the people want. There is an audience for women's cricket. There is a strong appetite for women's cricket in general. So we knew that we were on the right path. And what was your question once again, Srinivas?
So, how has the reach of women's cricket widened in the past 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, so a lot of credit for this widening of scope and the visibility goes to BCCI and ICC for televising a lot of these matches. 2016, when we started covering this, one of the objectives that we started this platform was that there was not enough coverage to the women cricketers and to the matches that were happening. So the idea was that we'll have a website, we'll have social media platform, whatever matches are happening, we'll cover it, we'll write about it, we'll share the articles, we'll celebrate those historic moments and special knocks by the cricket players through our social media handles. That was one of the objectives. Within a year, we realized that ICC, BCCIR, and a couple of other media houses, they started showing a lot of interest because the women's were also performing at the international stage. 2017 World Cup was a huge moment because that sort of changed the way everyone looked at women's cricket. The entire perception towards the women's sport changed because the girls, they reached the finals and it was played at the Lords. It was televised. There were close to 25,000 people at Lords watching the finals, and the crowd was super energetic. The stadium was packed, and that basically changed the entire perception of 1.2, 1.3 billion people watching their women in blue from India. So 2017 was a massive turnaround. 2018 there was a World Cup in West Indies. 2019 there was nothing, but the Indian team was, by this time, they were the household names. They were celebrated. They were criticized also when they were not performing well. Now because they were on TV, they were on social media, so the fans could interact. The fans could comment good, bad, ugly stuff. So when the players were performing, they definitely did get the praises. But when they were not performing, they were also criticized on social media. 2020 was again very historic because at the MCG, 86,000 plus people at the stadium were there to support both the team, the Australia and the India. So that was also a historic, tournament. When I talk about in general, so a lot of factors, a lot of things that helped women's cricket grow in the last 4-5 years. We definitely were in the forefront watching this transition happening, and it was heartening to see, the Indian women's cricket team. Where was it in 2015, in 2016, and where is it now? Where the players are celebrated, where there's a huge social media buzz happening, where every milestone is being tracked by historians, by statisticians, and a lot of other people, of course, on social media today.
Yeah, that's good to know, Vishal. And speaking of World Cups, out of 11 World Cups, 6 have been won by Australia, 4 by England. And out of 7 T20I World Cups, 5 have been won by Australia and 1 by England. Why do you think that Australia and England have such a huge advantage? And how much is it due to their domestic cricket?
So I believe, in my personal opinion, I think the major credit goes to the grassroots cricket, to the domestic cricket, like you rightly pointed. Um, a lot happens at the domestic stage in England and in Australia. I was reading a report which stated that the girls at the age of 4 and 5, they are enrolled in a cricketing setup, which is again very professional, which not just looks after their cricketing skills, but also tells them what to eat, how to go about things, which sort of education to take up, and it looks after the holistic approach about a cricketing talent. It is not just about the skills that they possess, but then this particular report talked about a lot of other factors that makes a better cricketer. That also helps a lot in the longevity of a particular cricketer. So I think Cricket Australia and England has adopted these patterns really well and has always been at the forefront when it comes to having a very professional setup for the cricketers. Apart from that, the other thing that has helped is definitely the investment which Cricket Australia and England has made at the grassroots level, at the domestic level. Again, the investment goes a long way in helping the cricketers with better infrastructure, with better facilities, with better training, with better equipped coaches, and I think a lot of these factors eventually helps in the overall development of a cricketer. In India, the domestic cricket is also again very robust, but still needs and still lacks a lot of improvement. So that is something which is an area of concern, and also because there are 1.3 billion people to look after. That is another challenge to have a debate on. But even as and when we progress, I think BCCI has also done really well in giving right infrastructure, in giving right exposure to these talents. And in the next 10 years, I do see this pattern changing, and more girls at the domestic level getting that right infrastructure. We definitely want to create an impact at the domestic level, and that is one of our visions to in the next 5 years. That is one of our visions to ensure that more and more girls have the right infrastructure in the very early stages, and they are nurtured really well, so that they don't just become a skilled cricketer, but a very good professional cricketer as a whole.
Yeah, thank you, Vishal. And it's good to know that India is gearing up in terms of developing an ecosystem for cricketers. I'm not sure many people know about the structure of women's domestic cricket in India. Can you please explain this to our listeners? Is it being telecasted?
The matches are not televised, the matches are not telecasted, but we definitely, like I said, have a very robust and structured domestic system as of now. Majority of the teams, they do get to participate in the tournaments. Due to COVID, this year there's only one tournament which is happening for the seniors. There is no under 19, there is no under 23 which is happening. Again, keeping a lot of restrictions and everything in mind. But as far as the matches being televised is concerned, currently they are not being televised.
Okay, thank you, Vishal. Now Raja will take few more questions for you.
So Vishal, I had we had a thought here. One of the most heartening features in women's cricket in India in this last decade is that this generation of superstars are also coming from small towns. Like your Smriti Mandhana is from Sangli, Harmanpreet Kaur is from Moga, Poonam Yadav and Deepti Sharma from Agra. So what are your thoughts on this?
That is definitely a beautiful change which is happening. If you see at the national team at the moment, more than 50% of the players come from tier 2, tier 3 parts of the country, which definitely has inspired and motivated a lot of young girls in these cities, especially in Agra, in places like Moga, where Harmanpreet comes from Sangli, from Kolhapur, where Anuja Patil comes from, and a lot of these girls they now look up to these cricketers, these national heroes, and have started taking up cricket in these respective cities. As far as my thoughts is concerned, it is definitely a welcome move, and a lot of these talents. One is that they they do not get those right infrastructure at the very early stage, and that is the reason why they are pushed really hard. So they are both mentally and physically very strong, and the moment they get a very good setup, they already have those required skills, because in these cities in tier 2, tier 3, they these girls are exposed to sports or cricket at a very early stage. Either their brothers are playing or someone in the family is playing the sport, so they take up these sports very readily, and the moment they get the better infrastructure, they start performing really well and then move up the ranks. So that is what I feel, in my personal opinion, that we do have more and more talents in these rural parts of the country, but which is currently are undiscovered because of the lack of infra and platforms. But as and when we have more setups, we do have more training and talent hunt happening in these centers, more and more girls would come forward from the more fertile areas and from the rural parts of the country.
That's fascinating. What you just described. Also, I wanted to ask you, we can see that in Australia and England especially, how the Women's Big Bash League and say the World Women's Super Cricket League changed things for women cricket in their respective countries. When do you think BCCI will expand the present T20 challenge played alongside the IPL to a full-fledged women's IPL?
See, what I believe is that it will take another 2 to 3 years to have a very structured women's IPL kind of a tournament for the girls. At the moment, we are relying on Women's T20 Challenge. Last year, we had a 3-team tournament participating. Hopefully, we'll see one more team this year. The dates and the schedules are not out yet, but we would definitely want to see one more team participating and gradually build on things from here. I understand that it is a bit challenging to hold tournaments and to conduct events given the era that we all are in. But I'm sure BCCI is doing their bit and ensuring that these girls get enough opportunities. Also, there was a recent news that India will be playing a test match against England. The women's cricket team will be playing a test match. So that is
Yes,
also
yes.
that is also a welcome move. When will they play is a question, but BCCI have announced that India and England will be playing a test after 6-7 years. So I'm sure that people at the administration are positive and optimistic about the growth and future of women's sport. It's just that through action and through opportunities, it is people like us will sort of agree to this particular fact.
And since you mentioned the test match, is it must be the first test match that India would be playing after your website, femalecricket.com, has been set up, right?
Actually, again, we're not very proud of this fact, but yeah, it will be the first time that the girls would be playing a test match. The Indian girls would be playing, although Australia and England they do play Ashes, and it has one test match in their setup, but the Indian girls would be playing for the first time.
Moving to the next question, it's slightly long, if you would allow me. One interesting part that we have seen in the last 4 to 5 years is that a lot of the current generation of players are very, especially in women's cricket as well, are very media savvy and also very social media savvy, with garnering a lot of millions of followers across various platforms, and in general building a certain brand for themselves. And on the other side of the spectrum, a lot of former players and greats like the Hall of Famer Lisa Sthalekar, Anjum Chopra, Mel Jones, Isha Guha are making their way into the commentary boxes with their very refreshing and unique perspectives. So what do you think that how important that it is for women cricketers to build a commercial brand as well, and also to have post career options, and how good so that more girls take up the sport, not just for a passion but also for a financial stability as well?
All right. So there are two questions. I'll handle them separately. Starting with the first one, how important is the commercial aspect for the female cricketers? It is very important for two reasons. The more these girls are on poster, the more these girls are on TV, the better would be the reach, not just for themselves but also for the entire women's cricket team. The more and more girls like Mithali Raj and Smriti Mandhana would be on the banners, would be on the hoardings, more and more people would be attracted to watch women's cricket, A, and B would be, they'll also realize that this particular sport can be a financially viable option for their daughters, for their own girls. So they would then start pushing them to take up cricket and not just studies, which is currently the only thing that the parents push their daughters in. So from both the aspects, one is that once the parents realize that this can be a financially viable option, career option, they would start pushing their daughters and start encouraging their daughters to take up not just cricket but any sport in general. And definitely this would also make these cricketers household names, and if they become household names, the TRPs, the coverage would increase. More and more girls in the tier 2, in the tier 3 parts would also realize the potential, and they would not be hesitant when it comes to taking this particular sport. What was the second question, may I ask?
Just as an extension, the post-career options that cricketers do have in terms of media appearances and commentary and all that.
So that is again by choice, because only 10 to 20% of the cricketers have these alternate or career options after their retirement. Still 80% of the cricketers prefer to stay back and enjoy their second innings. Again, it is their personal choice. But again, people like Anjum Chopra, people like Lisa Sthalekar and Isa Goa, who went ahead after their retirement, took up these roles, definitely has shown that there is again, a longevity in the career options. It is not just that you can contribute to women's cricket by being a cricket player, but there are so many other roles, there are so many other professions that you can take up today. You can be an umpire, you can be a cricket coach, you can be a statistician, you can become a physio, a nutritionist, a commentator. Like there are so many other roles that you can take up. It is not just once you're done with your playing career, your cricket is over. There are so many other ways that you can stay connected around the sport and make a living out of it. So that has also set a benchmark for a lot of these girls. That you can consider cricket as an option, because it not just pays you as a player, but so many other avenues that you can be a part of it.
Brilliant. to see that. Another question that I wanted to ask you is that as you mentioned, India women are playing South African women right now for the series, and during that series, Mithali Raj just crossed 10,000 international runs, being the second player in the world to do that and the first Indian player. And also, Jhulan Goswami is still going extremely strong, and he just had a brilliant performance in the second ODI, taking 4 wickets. So, a small word on both their longevity and legacy and their contribution to Indian cricket.
See, these are superstars. I think words would not be enough to describe and thank them for their contributions to the Indian women's cricket. They are the ones who started playing cricket when there was no future or there was no pay as such. They are the ones who had to travel unreserved trains. They had to stay in unreserved compartments and at a facility which was not convenient at all for the female cricketers. I had the honor and privilege of interviewing these two legends, and
Wow.
their stories are fascinating. From how they come from, where they come from, and the struggles that they had to go through early in their lives. It is all fascinating, but still, they sort of kept at it despite all the challenges, uh, despite all the societal taboos that these girls had to face early in their careers. They did not give up, and today they are more like an inspiration for a lot of thousands of girls that take up cricket in India today. So again, words would not be enough to sum up the contribution that they have had. They are the flag bearers for women's cricket in India, and I through this platform also, again, I keep thanking them, but through this platform also, I would like to thank them for taking up cricket, for choosing cricket, and blessing it with their performances and with their consistency.
I can actually feel the emotion that you're trying to convey, because it's something that is brilliant, and I think that the pillars on which current women's cricket stands in India today. Excellent. And finally, if I could ask you on a personal note, what are your future goals? Where do you see? You've touched upon it a little bit earlier, but where do you think you would want your venture to reach out to in maybe in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, the plans are again manifold because now we see a lot of opportunities, and apart from the opportunities, we see a lot of challenges that still exist in the system. And through female cricket, we want to tackle as much as possible, to these challenges. Uh, if I had to sum it up, the vision or the goals for the next 5 years, one of course is that we want to expand the female cricket academy and take it to a lot of these places where there are not enough facilities for the girls. We want to give them a platform where they could come train as young as possible, so that their cricketing careers can be streamlined and they can be told that this is the pathway, this is where you need to go, and this is how you need to train about things. So that is one goal, or that is one major focus that we have for the next 5 years. Apart from that, we do want to launch a lot of other products. For example, we do understand that having the right cricketing gears is as important as having the right t-shirts and having a right follow through and follow through actions.
Absolutely.
So we want to get into those areas as well, where we can give quality and affordable cricket equipments to these girls and cricket clothing to these girls. That would be another area that we want to look at. Apart from that, I do believe that there's a huge scope when it comes to the coverage of women's cricket. So what we are covering today would be what, hardly 10 or 20% of how the actual coverage should be for a women's cricket. So again, because we are also short on a lot of resources, and it's a bootstrapped startup that we all are at the moment. So we do take things as they come. So once we raise funds, once we have enough capital, once we have enough people and manpower within our setup, we want to ensure that we do we give the justice to the overall coverage for women's cricket. And yeah, so these are the major ones, major 5-year plans going forward.
It's brilliant. We just hope and pray that you and your organization grow even further, and you're going to accomplish whatever goals you've set out to, and even more than that. Because as we're all huge fans of what you're doing, and just the kind of passion that you're bringing to women's cricket, it's brilliant.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you so much.
and I'm sure I think we've already we've asked you this previously. So we have a segment called Hero of the Week that we do on a podcast, where we look at the brilliant performances across the cricketing world in the last week, and we give them a shout out. So we would love for it if you could do us the honor of announcing your Hero of the Week for this week, for this particular episode of ours.
So it has to be a cricketer. It has to be a national cricketer.
It could be anybody. It could be someone who's done brilliantly in the last week or so.
The first and the very obvious hero that comes to my mind at this particular day is Mithali Raj, of course. She reached 10,000 landmark just yesterday, and she's the one who started playing cricket in 1999. So over 23 years of cricketing career, and she's still going strong. She'll be playing the next year World Cup, and that is one of her dreams, to lift the World Cup for India. And she's only 273 runs short of surpassing Charlotte Edwards, who is currently at the top of the runs table. So, for me, hero of the week would be none other than Mithali Raj.
That's great. Thank you for that. It's been a wonderful interview. We've thoroughly enjoyed your presence, and it's been absolutely a thrill to have you here. And we wish you all the best, and we hope many more. You inspire a lot of people, and you keep inspiring people like us as well. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. Thank you for doing it.
So guys, let's move on to our next segment. How's that?
Before we move on, guys, I have a few questions for you. Do you want to answer?
Of course.
Okay. So you know that ICC just announced the players of the decade, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Players
So
of the
we all
month or a decade?
No, players of the decade.
Okay.
For 2001 to 2020. So Rashid Khan was the T20I player of the decade. So do you know who the female player of the decade is for T20 cricket?
Okay, I don't know.
No, I don't know.
Okay, so that is Elise Perry, right? Elise Perry is an all-rounder for Australia. So I'm
Yeah,
going to
I
ask
know
you next
her.
question
Yeah.
now. Yeah?
Yeah.
So who is the women's cricketer of the decade for ODI cricket?
Must be Mithali Raj.
No, the answer is again Elise Perry.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that was for T20 and ODIs, right? So they also have a category of the player of the decade across formats, across even test cricket and everything included. So who is the female test cricketer, or female player of the decade across
Don't say
formats?
it's her again.
It's her again.
Oh my god.
So I just want to tell our listeners that we're in the midst of a great cricketing career of this particular player, and and if ever the opportunity comes to watch Cricket Australia women's cricket in action, we should go for it. So this was one part of the House Art. So the second part of House Art, where we talk about some unknown and unforgotten stories of cricket, is that most people would think that the first Cricket World Cup was played in 1975, right? It was won by West Indies in 1975. But in fact, that is wrong. The first Cricket World Cup was in fact played for women's cricket in 1973 in England. The first Women's World Cup was in fact played in England and won by the hosts England in 1973. So it was actually it was an idea which was floated by a private businessman called Jack Hayward, who personally donated around £40,000 to cover the costs of this tournament. And it featured 7 different teams. And it was a round-robin tournament in the sense that there was no scheduled knockouts or finals. And the teams which competed were the test-playing countries of, at that point, so women test-playing countries of England, Australia, and New Zealand. Trinidad, there were teams of Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. So these comprised 5 teams. There was a young England team of women cricketers who were under the age of 25. So they had a team of their own, and there was also an international 11 which made up the 7th team, and that comprised players from across other countries who didn't have a representation here. So the teams played a round robin format, 6 matches each, and England ended up being on top, and the tournament was lifted by Rachel Hayhoe Flint, whose name who is in fact a legend in women's cricket, right on the par of say someone like a Don Bradman or a WG Grace. And in fact, the Women's Player of the Year awards that ICC gives out every year is named after her. So this was the Howsat for this week, that Women's World Cup actually predated the Men's World Cup, and it's going on, it's getting even stronger and stronger.
Yeah, thank you, Raja. Thanks for bringing another amazing story. And yeah, that's all for the week, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.